Thank you, David. Thank you all for having me here today. It's a pleasure being here with you. And thank you, Deadeye. He did explain that we go back a long time, and that we've been corresponding with, free. Not too many emails, but throughout the years, and we got a chance to meet a couple of years ago. And then when you were explaining it today, I think you brought us into like the prehistoric. I always tell my kids, I used to be the guy who used to ride the dinosaurs. That's how old it is. And you talked about couplers. Wow, I forgot about that. So thank you, for that introduction and for your just hospitality. You picked me up late last night. We got in, and I got to see little parts of the Midwest on the way from Chicago up here. But my wife's whole family, she's like related to half of Wisconsin, at least half of the Armenians in Wisconsin, between the Baradians and the Cations. And it was great sitting at family tables and being with family today. And that's what I think I feel like whenever this is my second time here. You really have a beautiful family. And that's something that we don't have on the West Coast, because many times you'll go through church services and it's more of a cathedral mentality by us. In other words, people come, and our church, for instance, in Glendale, maybe at a packed, it'll be 350. And every week we pack it, but it's different people. It's different people. And it's just a different complexion. So I admire the community that you've built over here. And it's great to be here. What I'd like to do is share with you some information about what's going on with your cousins on the West Coast, what's happening in the Armenian community, especially this latest project called Datev Outreach, and I'll explain in a few minutes how we arrived at the name, and how it works for us in the church. Deadeye had said a few minutes ago, and I do want to take a moment just to express the idea of In His Shoes. He said a few moments ago about the In His Shoes ministries, and I know many of you have contributed throughout the years. About 10, 15 years ago, when I got to LA, we rounded up a group of young Armenians. We said, what does it mean to be an Armenian? Especially when you're descendants of genocide survivors. You know, genocide is one of those words they throw out over here. I was in Argentina a few years ago, and I met the Sirpazan over there, and we were talking, and he says, on April 24th, a group of Armenian kids came and said, Archbishop, will you lead the march against genocide? And he says, what do you want me to do? They said, pick up some rocks and we're going to throw it at the Turks. This is like a 70-year-old Archbishop. He's laughing. He says, this is all it comes down to. Well, there's got to be something more than just hating Turks. And so we challenged young people, what does it mean to be genocide survivors and be Armenian? They came up with the idea of In His Shoes. The only way that it makes sense for us is to walk in the shoes of other people, to walk in the shoes of other genocide survivors. And so this young group of kids, I'm very pleased to say, through the course of years, have raised over $750,000 for children in Africa suffering in genocide countries, such as Darfur, such as the Sudan. And these are Armenian kids. And what I'm really excited about it is that it's for the first time we're seeing Armenians not saying, please help us. You know, I don't need Obama to tell me that the genocide's real. I'm not asking anybody for favors. Instead, they're going out and they're saying, we're ready to help you. And we got to get into that mentality. We got to get our kids to stop thinking of themselves as victims. We're victors. We've made it. And that's what Datev Outreach is, probably the latest program out of In His Shoes, and I'm very excited because Archbishop Hovnan Derderin, our primate, has adopted it. It's working throughout the diocese, and I'm excited to share with you today some stories. So bear with me, and if there's any questions along the way, maybe afterwards, I'll be happy to answer. But I want to share with you a few stories that I think will touch you. The first one is, I want to start off, and I'm going to just use some random names. What did Jack Webb used to say? The names have been changed to protect the innocent. But there are no innocent in this thing. Haigui, she is a lady who came to us. And I'm going to start with this story, and I'm going to end with this story. So I got to tell you, it's a little bit tragic what I'm going to be talking about today. Haigui is a lady who for the last 20 years has been abused by her husband. She's been beaten. She's been psychologically, emotionally abused. Her husband brought her to America 20 years ago with the promise that you would get citizenship over here, you would get your green card. 20 years, nothing happened. Finally, last year in the fall, she ran away after a beating, a brutal beating. She goes from home to home in Glendale. In Glendale, like Deadeye explained, we're packed. Every house is Armenian. She went from house to house saying, please, I need your phone. For 10 minutes, she recalls, bloody and beaten. She's walking home to home. Let me use your telephone. My brother, my sister, every one of them closed the door on her. One guy even says, Amot Archie. And you know, Amot, everybody should know that word. It's a tragic word that we have. In fact, my mom tells a lot of people, America has everything except Amot. And unfortunately, we Armenians have kept that Amot. It's the shame. And one man actually told her, Amote, it's a shame. Go back to your husband. Finally, 10 minutes later, she gets to an African-American woman's house, beats on the door, and she lets her in. Lets her use the phone. She gets to the authorities. She gets out there, and she gets into a shelter. She eventually hooked up with us, with Datev Outreach. And that's where I want to begin today's story, okay? This story begins several years before this, when I was pastoring, and throughout the years, I'm sure all of the Dead Hives will know that there's opportunities for people to come and share their pain with them. But it was very weird. One year, I had 5 different women, not all physically abused, but psychologically, emotionally, financially abused. They were all coming to me, and I thought to myself, wow, I know 5 of them. Very unusual. And I asked each of them, I said, would you be willing to talk to somebody else? I said, you know, you're not alone. You have sisters who are feeling this pain. Do you want to talk? Not one of them wanted to. Again, Amot. We don't talk about these things. And that's when I thought, okay, we've got to do something about this. And it was a few years ago, I talked to Sirpazan, and he said, go ahead, you please use the facilities, organize something. So we started talking about domestic violence in the community and started doing our research. Like, how prevalent is it? What's going on? And we found out some amazing statistics. I'm sure all of you know some of the big ones that there are. Let me just share with you some of the big statistics, because these are important to know that we're not just isolated as Armenians. Every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten. Every 9 seconds. How many women have been beaten in the course of this gathering that we've had today? Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused during her lifetime. 1 in 3. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women. Every day in the United States, more than 3 women are murdered by their husband or boyfriends. So we have these statistics. Now we wanted to know what it was like in the Armenian community. So we went to the district attorney's office. Guess what we found out? Every day in Los Angeles district, they're prosecuting. Not the ones that don't get prosecuted. They're prosecuting 2 Armenian families, men, every day. Do the math. That's epidemic. That's epidemic. That's not talking about all the ones that don't get to prosecution, have been called in and maybe charges haven't been pressed against them. So we came out with these statistics, and Sirpazan said, we've got to do something about this. And we're starting to look for funding. We're trying to get some awareness out of it. And unfortunately, you don't have it much here, but in Los Angeles, the Armenian politics get into it. What are you using the money for? What are you doing that? And we just said, let's stay away from all of that. We went to the Armenian consulate in Glendale. And this was a lady who went to the consulate. She said, Deadeye, don't worry about it. I know the consul general, he'll fund this. And so she went to him, and you know what the consul general said? Domestic violence is not a priority for us. He said that to us on September 30th, 2010. October 1st, 2010, look what happened. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Zarui Petrosyan. She's a young mother who was beaten to death by her husband and mother-in-law in Armenia. Beaten to death. Zarui Petrosyan became a martyr for this cause. And it certainly was the one thing that I needed. Because how dare they say this is not a priority when even one, Jesus says if that's that one sheep that's lost, you better be out there. And I'm thinking, okay, it's epidemic. There's 500 cases every year that are being prosecuted, Armenian families. But even if there's one case, isn't that too many? I mean, what are we living in? We're living in supposedly a society that's behaved. Now, how do we get to the church in here? To me, it's very simple. If we are really going to believe what we preach, if we are the body of Christ, where else is Christ going to be? Where else would Christ be except with that woman? Where else would Christ be but in that environment? And that's where we started from. We said, let's forget about all the politics. Let's forget about funding this from the government. Let's do it because we are Armenian Christians and we can do it. And we came up with a very simple logo, and it is one which we developed into an icon, actually. Let me bring it back up. Excuse me. This icon was developed last year, or excuse me, a couple of years ago. Let me see what happened to it. Okay, there it is. This is called Violence Hurts, Love Conquers. Artist Gregory Palarian did this, and because you have made it over here as a special treat to all of our listeners today, I've made small copies of it, and I'd like all of you to take this. It's a small reminder that your sisters in California are dealing with some big things, but we, as the church, are bigger than that because love is greater than that. We have to believe this. And so this is where we started from. Love conquers all of the difficulties out there. And our Armenian church is so equipped for it. We're holistic. Think about it for a moment. When you walk into a church, holistic, all of your senses are at play, right? I mean, you smell the home, you taste the body, you feel each other in the vulturing, you hug one another. This is what we have to offer as a church to these people. And things have been moving along in that way. We started with this simple idea, look, violence hurts, love conquers. And last year, 2013, January, Surpazam gave us an office in the diocese. And we got a toll-free number, 1-855-DATEV-77. You call it up, and there's somebody there 24 hours. We trained a group of Armenian women to volunteer, to talk to these women. Basic thing, start off with prayer. Basic thing, what is your need? Are you in need of an ambulance right now? Are you in need of just somebody to talk to? Do you want somebody to come down? And these Armenian women started answering phones, and the hotline got off to a start. Now, I want to share with you last year at our church picnic. I know everybody has church picnics, and they're fun little places. One woman had heard about that. She came up to me, I'm being abused at the house. Now, this is what I did at the picnic. I found 4 of the women who had been serving at the DATEV outreach. I said, so I told them our sister needs help. They literally made a human circle around her. They brought her in. Now everybody's eating kebab and all this stuff. You should have seen the compassion. You should have seen the warmth. At the end of it, this woman left there with hope. Within a few days, we found out that she had left the husband, she had found a job, and she had found some other residence, and we're continuing to monitor her. And to me, this is the presence of Christ. Earlier that in the beautiful sermon he gave inside, said so beautifully, you don't know how the angels are going to be touching you. It may be a high five. I don't know how all of this is going to pan out, but I'm going to share with you a lot of these kind of miracles that have been happening. But along the way, we also found out something even more tragic, if you can believe it. Because for all of these husbands and wives that were having problems, guess who was there? Nobody's noticed. The children. Nobody noticed these children. We saw the children were being taken away by social services. Armenian kids.
And we started looking into them. There's 93 Armenian kids in the LA system that are looking for foster families. And guess what? There's only 2 Armenians qualified to open their home. So we're seeing these Armenian kids being sent out to non-Armenian homes, some of it in deplorable conditions. So we started a campaign. Let's talk about foster families. These are our children. And I'm going to share with you one story. Her name is Anash. She's 13 years old, past that age of being cute, so nobody wants to adopt her. She has 3 siblings, 2 younger siblings who immediately got adopted, fortunately. 1 sibling who's 19, she's in prison. Her parents are in prison for drug-related crimes. You know, you don't go to prison for drugs, you go to prison because you break into somebody's house to get those drugs, you do something. So her parents are in jail, her father just got released, he comes in and out of her life, and she's 13 years old, she's been thrown out of every institution, and she's rebelling, she's fighting. She doesn't want to be with anybody, she's got issues of her own. So we approached, and this is really one of those difficult situations because we even found a family that could handle her. And at the end of it, after 6 months, they couldn't. We had to put her back into the institution. And it just hurt me that here was an Armenian kid. And if you see her, she's just as beautiful as any one of your kids. Inside and out, but just lost. And you know, within a few years, she's just going to follow the path that her parents set up and her sister has done. And again, I think to myself, okay, if Christ were here, what does he do? He'd reach out. He'd reach out as much as he could. Have to give the love. And this is the challenge for us. So we went out and we started reaching out. We started talking about the Amot. And one of the first things that we did is we organized a walk in Glendale. Now Glendale, like Deadeye said, it's thousands of Armenians who don't want to talk about any of the problems. So we got a bunch of our people. We got a couple of policemen, they're on both sides. And we just started walking throughout the streets of Glendale with signs that say, violence hurts, love conquers. We brought the church to the streets of Glendale. So I was going to share with you that some of the magic is happening like this. We started walking from our church in Glendale to the diocesan headquarters, which is in Burbank. It's a 6-mile walk. And we had all kinds of people come out. Everybody's walking on the streets and stopping for photographs, smiling and everything. And we even had the local police, Burbank and Glendale police, escorted us. Now imagine, in the place where they call it Amot, we're saying, no, we're not Amot. And when people said, who are you? We're saying the church, the Armenian church. What? Yeah, the Armenian church. You know, the same people who do the hung and the candles? No, we're out there. Well, at night we get to, this is another one of those magical moments. We got to the diocese and Archbishop Hovnan greeted us, the primate, and then Archbishop Vache, our former primate, was there. And we said, here's our group, and he was ready to accept us. What happens? He said, I've got to get going because there's a guest coming. And we said, okay, said Fazan, of course, you know. He says, but go into the church and, you know, lead them in a prayer. And we went into the church. And when we came out, guess who was there? The Patriarch of Jerusalem. The newly elected Patriarch. And so he said, well, okay, that's good. He's going to give you a blessing. You know what he said? He heard our story. He said, every one of those children that you find, I'm ready to pick up and bring to Jerusalem. I will finance them until they're 18 years old. I will give them an education. I will give them a roof over their head and food. Where does that come from? The miracle of God, right? Just, you think this is chance. You think Deadeye's high five was chance. You think this is chance. You're in the wrong world. These are the miracles that we're witnessing. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but at least we're talking about it. At least an Armenian clergyman is talking about something we wouldn't talk about. Violence hurts, love conquers. This is what the message is out there. Now, some of the other things that came up. At that walk, all of a sudden, we see a Filipino woman sitting in the front row. She's crying like a baby. I went up to her, I said, what's going on? Well, 2 days ago in Los Angeles, there was a tragedy. One woman was beaten by her husband and decapitated. And And so it made all the headlines, all the news headlines. This was the woman's sister. I said, what are you doing at an Armenian church? She happened to be in her grief. She opened up the Google search, domestic violence, and we came up. I'm not saying Google's an agent of God, but she came to our thing. And all of a sudden she was surrounded by a bunch of Armenians who were there supporting her, helping her through this moment. Another miracle. Now, here's a big one. You know who this guy is? Actually, Larry, we were talking earlier about our friend, mutual friend, Mark Yarros. You know the famous, infamous, the lawyer. Mark Yarros' personal friend, he called me up, he says, my client is Chris Brown, the famous artist. He says, he's got to do community service for beating Rihanna. Can he come to Datev Outreach? I said, sure, Mark, send him over. Chris Brown showed up. Now, I got to tell you this. Do we have time? Are we okay?
Yeah, we have time.
There's some fun stories with this. Because now, I'm right in the middle of Glendale. Now, all the little Armenian girls saw him on the lawn. So I got out in front of the church because he's trying to keep a low profile. I said, and I just scolded them, like, get out, girls, get away from this. We can't have too much publicity. They started coming up, they took out their phones, they're taking pictures. All of a sudden, his bodyguard in a big black limo, what is it, SUV, just comes out. Big old guy. Never seen anything like big old guy. He just stood there and looked at the girls, and they all ran away. So then my voice is okay, but this guy really knew how to handle it. Anyway, Chris Brown, what's interesting about him, he's really not the poster child for domestic violence. In fact, he's somebody who's been involved in domestic violence. But he's coming to me, I said, Chris, what can you do for me? I said, I want to help you, I want to give you those hours, but for me to give you a broom doesn't make sense to clean up my church. What do you do? And he says, you know, I love to paint. I love to do some artwork. So we did some meditations. I gave him the artwork, Love Conquers. And I said, Chris, can you express yourself in this? And he started painting right there on our front lawn. And he started getting emotional. We started talking about Christ. I shared with him the story of Christ on the cross and how he was also misunderstood, because deep down in all of these, there's these people that want to be healed. And Chris drew this beautiful painting. It was a monster. And in the very corner of it, there was a little red thing. And I said, Chris, what is that? And he says, that's a heart. He says, people need to know that even monsters have hearts. I said, that's right. I said, you know, even the worst of the worst, God uses. God uses people. We've got to just allow God to use people. So Chris came out. When the girl right next to him is Anna Gasparian. She was running our center that day that he was there. You're going to like this. Every time Chris would come, before she would work with him, she'd force him to go into the church with her, and they'd pray in the Armenian church. And so Chris was praying one day when all of a sudden Serpazan walked in. And Serpazan's got that big old nice gold thing, you know, the banake hanging there. And he goes up and he meets Chris, and Chris picks up, hey, that's a nice bling, you know. Bling, bling. The Armenians have the best blings, you know. Anyway, again, he's not the poster child, but what I'm saying is we don't know how the miracles are working out, but he has touched us in many ways. Another artist is, actually, I think, Gor Mkhitaryan in the middle over here. Gor Mkhitaryan, famous artist from Armenia, who does a lot of work within the community. He wrote a song for us, and he dedicated it to women of domestic violence. Let me read to you the words to it, and I'll translate. Հայրենիքում մեր հնամիա ուրձունվում են հերոս կանայք, մենք չենք դառնում նրանց պաշտպան, ոչ էլ հենարան. In Armenia, we have some of the most heroic women that are born, but we don't stand up to protect them. Բարգևում են նրանք մեզ զավակներ, բռնությունը ստանալով նվեր. They give us children, and in return they receive violence. մենք գործնում ենք հարքան ուսեր, դալով միանց հավեր. We lose our respect for these women, giving them only pain. And for an artist in the Armenian community to come out and talk about this, again, it's another step to getting the word out. And so we feel very blessed that all of these people are making some noise and talking about it. Now we get to Datev Outreach. We came up with this name just last year, after we had started, actually. We never started as Datev. But it came to me that, we should dedicate this to one of the saints. And which saint do you pick? Well, we know there's a saint, Krikor Datevatsi. But the word Datev in Armenian is made up of two words, Da, Tev, to give wings. And that's what we're doing for these women. That's what we're doing to the families, giving wings, giving them opportunities to grow, giving them opportunities to reach to new places. We're giving them education. I'm very pleased to show you the first graduating class. That's it. There's 4 of them. All of these women, domestic violence, but we taught them computer skills. We taught them how to balance a checkbook. We taught them how to get a job, how to fill out resumes as applications. And this is a small step, but you know what? It's 4 women that aren't going to be dependent on anybody so that they don't have to go through the beating. This is our first graduating class. Now every week we get together women, we bring them in, we talk to them, and we share with them. Some of the other big things. I'm very, very happy to announce that St. Fazan in our diocese, beginning 2015, has made it marriage counseling mandatory to get married. In other words, you can't just go up to the dead-eyed and say, I want to get married and please do it. No, you go to marriage counseling courses, okay? Not just one, but he's made it a mandatory. And if you walked into any dead-eye's office to get married, there's a big sign that says no marriage license, no wedding. Now we're saying no counseling, no wedding. And this is a big thing in the Armenian community. I'm very proud that we saw this happen. And I'm going to end it today by sharing with you the same story of Haikui. Do you remember the woman who went door to door, beating on them? Well, last November, she was in a shelter with her son. She was comfortable. And we got together, through the Inish's mission, we send out a lot of Thanksgiving packages to families. And we sent her a Thanksgiving package, a big old turkey with all the trimmings and everything. And Haikui, who had not been waiting 20 years to become an American citizen, had endured all kinds of beating, in a shelter, she gets this package. Well, we talked to her a week later, and she said, I took that turkey, I cooked it for everybody in the shelter, and I told them it's from the Armenian Church. And on top of it, when I thought, here's a woman who had no idea what America was, she was saying thank you, the spirit of thanksgiving, which is, I think, what the Pilgrims had in mind, what we have in mind, and what our church can do. So in the end, violence hurts, but love conquers. If we just believe what we preach, I think there's going to be so many miracles that we're going to be seeing. So this is what we do out there with the latest project called Datev Outreach. I'm blessed by having just incredible women who are supportive, who are praying. And I've got to tell you, this is one of the biggest things. You got to have a regular prayer life. These women get together and they pray for these people. And they pray for me and I pray for them. And with that prayer begins the miracles. So I leave it at that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or else I'm here on site, be happy to take anything else. And thank you very much for listening.
Any questions for Derhad? Any question? Okay, Elsie.
Are most of these men foreign born, or are they born here in the U.S.?
You got all kinds. It crosses all geographics, all demographics. They're just everybody. And that's such a good question, because many Many times we'll get people who come up and say, "Oh, those must be all the highest." No, it's actually across the board. Be surprised what it is. Yes.
America adopt some of those children instead of taking to Jerusalem. Said that these children that were taken away from their families.
Right, thank you. Yeah, no, my reference in Jerusalem was, at least we started talking about it. Right now, we haven't sent anybody to Jerusalem, and our object is to get Armenian families here to start adopting. So, but it's a slow process. It takes 6 months to get a family accredited to be a foster family. At Christmas time, I watched 3 siblings, Armenian siblings, get sent to 3 different homes in one of the worst parts of LA. It was very, very sad. Yes?
Not to take anything away from the women, but obviously the men are causing the problem. Is there any outreach going to the men to educate them on what's going on to help stop that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that actually, there are, it's relatively insignificant, but there are cases where men are abused by their wives. And we see that in the Armenian community as well. They're relatively small in number. But your question is more of the men who are perpetrating these crimes. Are we trying to help them? We're starting educational processes. We have speakers that come in from different areas, from the Middle East, to talk to them. Because the American-born are, we were able to speak in English, but you need to it's not just a question of language with the ones that are foreign-born. It's somebody who understands their mentality. So we've got a few speakers, and right now it's just at the point of classes. So they have to make the effort of coming to us. And also I want to invite you to our website, datevoutreach.org, because over there you'll see some videos that have been made for these men. So we're trying to reach them by video. We do have Diocesan Television, which gets out there on Saturday and Sunday on the Armenian networks. So we're trying, but it's very small. It's small steps. Yes?
I kind of have a multi-part question. Do you have actually a physical shelter for these women, or are you putting them in social services shelter?
Yes, the question is, do we have a physical shelter? And no, we don't. That's our long-term goal, is to have a shelter. It's part of our projected, it's in our business plan. But right now, we work as a referral service.
So they're going to other DV shelters, and so then I'm guessing you're working with non-Armenian women as well, and in the community, these organizations are working together with DACA.
Okay, we are not working with non-Armenians at this point because they wouldn't come to us for this. There's already, but if they called, we wouldn't say, no, I'm sorry. We wouldn't.
No, I meant the organizations.
The organization, we work with YWCA. They've given us
That's
some.
who I work for, that's why I'm asking.
YWCA has given some opportunities, but don't forget that a lot of the Armenian women who come from, especially the former Soviet Union, are reluctant to open up to institutions. That's where our Armenian church is powerful, because they understand the church is a little bit different. They understand that there's a God there. Even if they haven't been brought up, they understand that there's something special about this church. And they're open, at least they're opening up. YWCA, and then with some local motels and hotels, we've arranged for small vouchers. So if there is a woman who needs immediate relief, we can send one with a voucher to go to the hotel and get a couple nights sleep. Yeah.
This is one of my passions, and I'm so excited to hear what you're doing. And I work for 2 organizations, well, one I work for, one I have my own business, that both support domestic violence, and I might be able to help you with some funding, because between the YWCA and Mary Kay Inc. Have their own domestic violence foundation. So I can pass some information along to you.
I'd love to, yeah,
Okay.
let's pass it. Like I said, this icon over here, I've made cards for everybody. It has our website at the bottom. I'd like it if you would just take these home and just share the message with your friends, with your families. Tell people that they need to pray for these women and these families. And again, I thank you for having me here. This was very special for me.
Once again, thank you for coming and of course for the wonderful presentation. You enlightened us. Is there a way that the folks here can do to help Datev Outreach? in any way?
Let me tell you something which is very ugly, but I tell you as sisters and brothers in the Armenian community, let's leave the church out. In the Armenian community, there's unfortunately a lot of jealousies. I'm sure you probably have heard because you don't experience them here. But we have some big problems. We went to a few of the councilmen, we went to a few of the government officials, and the minute the other Armenian churches, quote unquote, heard about us, there was undermining. And then we just said, you know what, for a few $1,000s, let's just keep it privately funded, at least for the time being. And we are all on private funds. It's people who believe in us that are giving it. And this has been a way that I've done my ministry for the last 31 years, is if you provide something good, our people are the greatest and most generous people I've ever met. Because if they believe in something that is right, they will give. So right now, that's our prayer, that we can sustain this with private funding. Sarpazan, in fact, was so excited about it. He took our proposal right to one of his friends and just got us a $50,000 grant, which at least gets us started for the office work and everything. But we do need private funding. If you'd like to participate, you can go to the website. There's a button that says donate, make a donation there. You can give me a check made out to Datev Outreach. Do not make it out to me because I'm on a plane and I'm headed towards, I was going to say that's Sin City, but no, make it out to Datev Outreach just to keep everything clean. Do not give me cash. And there's ways that you can participate. The biggest way, and I'm very serious about this, is pray for Datev Outreach. Keep it in your prayer life. When you say your prayers at night, in the morning, whenever say, and for Datev Outreach. I think when we start praying, we're more conscious that we have to help. So if you'd like to donate, yes, you can see me today. Checks made to Datev Outreach, or just go to the website, and that would be great. Thank you, Deadeye, for allowing.
Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Thank you, Deadeye. Deadeye has some postcards over here, some information about Datev Outreach. The website address is here, his phone number and his personal email address and so forth. So if you need to get in touch with him, you can do so.
Also, excuse me, I have copies of the brochures that are throughout Los Angeles. In fact, Glendale police have these brochures right inside of their cars. So when they go to break up a domestic violence problem, they give this brochure to the ladies. It's written in Armenian and in English. I have maybe about 30, 40 copies. If anybody's interested, please help yourself to this.
Before the closing prayers, again, let me remind you of the upcoming retreat in 3 weeks on April 5th. Please see Melanie afterwards. The deadline is tomorrow to sign up, and as I said, inside, even if you decide the day before you want to go, just come on up or call her or their Yeprem. Like I said, the only thing that they're going to prepare is probably additional sandwich, and they can manage that. So.